Alright, these are the 9.1 video notes. So, we're going to start with the Pythagorean theorem. Hopefully you know this one. It is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now, I also sometimes say it as leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared, just because I want you to know that it's always, c is always the hypotenuse, and that's very important. Alright, Pythagorean triples are when you take three different integers, so whole numbers, and you plug them in the Pythagorean theorem and they work. So for example, 3 squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. So if the legs of the triangle are 3 and 4, you know, and the hypotenuse is 5, you know it's a right triangle. It works out perfectly. These are all different multiples of the Pythagorean triples. So one set is 3, 4, and 5. If you times each one by 2, 6, 8, and 10 are also Pythagorean triples. If you times them by 3, 9, 12, and 15. Well, if you times them by the same number, they're still in the same ratio, so they're all Pythagorean triples. Here's some common sets. It's not just these, but 5, 12, and 13 times by 2, there's the set, times by 3, times by any number. As long as you times each leg and the hypotenuse by the same number, they're still going to be triples. And here are some other sets. Okay, so in your student journal, I want you to do number 1 and number 5. We're going to find the value of x, and then we're going to tell if they are a Pythagorean triple. So first we're going to do 81 squared plus 108 squared equals x squared. That is always the hypotenuse over here. So I'm just going to type that in my calculator, 81 squared plus 108 squared, and I'm going to get that it is 18,225 equals x squared. So now I square root both sides, and once again I just use my calculator and I square root that number. And so when I do that, I end up with 135. So x equals 135. So this is a Pythagorean triple because all three numbers were integers, whole numbers without decimals. Okay, so over here with x, this one, x is a leg, so we're going to do x squared plus 55 squared equals 77 squared. Now, I'm going to go ahead and type these in my calculator, and I'm going to have that 55 squared is 3,025. Sorry. And so I'm going to go ahead and write that down right there. And that 77 squared is 5,929. Now I'm going to subtract the 3,025 to the other side. And I'm going to end up finding out that x squared is 5,929 minus 3,025. X squared is 2,904. Now to find just x, I'm going to square root that number. And I'm going to end up with a decimal. So I'm going to have x is 53.89 approximately. Now, in a perfect world, I would like you guys to go ahead and reduce the radical, but for this example, we're not going to. So since x became a decimal, x is not a Pythagorean triple. Alright, so what we have here is talking about the Pythagorean theorem. If it does work out that a squared plus b squared does equal c squared, then you know it's a right triangle. If the hypotenuse squared is less than the side squared added, then it is acute, and if it's greater than, right here, then it is obtuse. So we're going to test this. So we know the longest one is always going to be our c squared. So I'm going to take c squared, so 234 squared, and then over here I'm going to have 90 squared plus 216 squared. And I'm going to put a question mark right here saying I don't know if they are equal, I don't know if they are less than or greater than. So I'm going to do 234 squared, and over here I get 54,756. Now I'm going to type in 90 squared plus 216 squared, and I get 54,756. So since they are equal, I say that this is a right triangle. Okay, so over here, if you're not sure which one's the longest, type in square root of 3 in your calculator. You find that it's about 1.73. So that's definitely the longest. So I'm going to do square root of 3 over here, and I'm going to have 1 squared plus 1 squared over here. So if I type this in my calculator, I find it's 3, which makes sense because the square root and the squared are inverse operations, and so they essentially cancel each other out. 1 squared plus 1 squared is 2. So I find out that this is greater than, so the one that is greater than is obtuse. So this is an obtuse triangle. That's all the video notes for tonight. You don't have to do the other problems in your student journal, just these 4. So come to class ready to learn tomorrow and ask me any questions you have.